Hello, this video continues from the previous video which demonstrated how to take information from a website and move it into a program like Excel or SPSS. This time I want to show how to take the information from the website and move it into R. Again, we want to recognize that we're taking data from what would be considered parallel format. So we have two separate data sets next to each other, and we want to put it into the serial format where we have a special variable, a unique variable that's used to indicate the control group versus the treatment group. So the first thing I'm going to notice is that we have 23 students in the control group and 25 students in the treatment group, and for each individual we have both a pretest and a post-test score. Now, the first thing I'm going to do in R may seem a little specific, but I'm actually going to create a variable called treat. And this variable, if you saw the previous video, was essentially 0 for the individuals that were in the control group and 1 for individuals that were in the treatment group. Now, this could all be done in one line, but I'm actually going to do it broken apart in a couple of lines to make it a little easier to follow. But essentially the function that I want to use is rep.int, which is a function that will simply create a number of variables repeated. So for example, if I say rep.int 7, 5, I simply get 7 repeated 5 times. Well, I actually want to do rep.int, and I want it to repeat the value 0 23 times because there are 23 individuals in the treatment group. Now, I'm going to assign this value to the variable treat. So I've typed treat for treatment group. I've used the assignment indicator rep.int, and once I hit return, it creates that variable, and now I have treat. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the next set of individuals, and this time though I need to say treat, and I want to combine what I currently have for treat, which is the 23 zeros, with the next set of values, which are a total of 23 ones. So I'll say 1, 25 in the rep.int variable. And now if I say treat, I've got 23 zeros followed by 25 ones. All right, so I've created my treat variable, and I'm going to set that aside for a moment because what I need to do now is I need to get my pretest and post-test data in for each of the individuals. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to select the data for the control group. I'll copy this. And the function that I want to take advantage of here is called the scan function. And scan essentially allows R to read in information. So if I go ahead and paste my information and hit return, it still thinks I'm entering, so I have to hit return one more time. And essentially it just reads in that information. Now, it reads it in by row and creates one long column. So if I come back to the website, I see 29 and 26 of the values for the first individual, the person's pretest and post-test score, and that's listed as the information here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assign, so this is my control group, so I'll say CORTO control, and I'm going to assign this, and I'm going to say scan, open and close parenthesis, hit return, paste the values, hit return twice, and now if I type control, I have all the data that's been read in. Unfortunately, it's been read in as one long list. So now what I want to do is I want to use the array function to put this into a column. Well, if I notice my columns here, I have 23 rows and 2 columns. So at first you think, well, I want to take the values for control, and I want the dimensions to be 23 and 2. Unless, if I actually hit return here, I'm going to come back and talk about the input here. If I hit return here, it's going to look wrong. Now, to clarify, the array function had 2 inputs. Control, which was the information that I had scanned in, and dim, which I set to equal to the array 23, 2, 23 rows and 2 columns. And so again, the notation here is dim equals C for the combine function 23, 2. Now when I hit return, this doesn't look right because I noticed that 29 is in the right spot, but 26 was supposed to be in the second column in the first row, and instead it's been listed going down. That's because array fills the function by rows and then moves to the next column. So what I need to do is I need to trick R into filling it into the way I want it to. So I'm actually going to tell it to do 2 rows with 23 columns. Now, at first glance, this doesn't look to be correct, but if I do this, I have 29 and 26 paired up correctly. The only difference is that now it's in a column, whereas in my original data, it was in a row. So what I'm going to do next is use the transpose function, which is simply t, and I'll enclose everything in parentheses. And now, when I use the transpose function, the data that I've read in actually looks like the data that I have on the website. So I'm going to actually do something where if I were to look at control, it's still the one long list, but if I use the function that the function that was just built up using the t and the array, it actually has the correct values. I'm going to assign control to this new function. So when I type control now, it spits out the array that in the format I want. So I'm going to do the same thing for treat. Treat is assigned to scan, open and close parenthesis. I hit return. I'll come back to the website. I'll highlight the data in the treatment column, excuse me, in the treatment data set, the both columns. I'll copy this. I'll come back to R, paste, hit enter a couple of times, and I have my treatment values read in. Now again, just to kind of walk through it, even though when you actually enter it, you would do it in one line, I would want to say array, open parenthesis, treat for the values I want it to put into the array. The dimension that I want it to have should equal, and I need to put in the 2 dimensions. So I say C parenthesis. I want it to put it in 2 rows with 25 columns total. So it's the same data, it's just presented horizontally instead of vertically. I'll use the transpose function to make it look the way I actually want it to, namely with 25 rows and 2 columns. And using that, I'll simply say treat is assigned to that. And now I have the control, and I have the treat. Now notice I used lowercase treat here because in the uppercase treat is still the string of zeros and ones. Now I'm going to combine my data set. I'm going to rbind my data set, and I'm going to say control, comma, treat, and this simply takes the 2 data sets and stacks them one on top of the other, where control is first and treatment is second. I'm going to call this my.data, and when I type my.data, lo and behold, I actually get my values. Now to this, I want this to be what's called a data frame, so I'm going to say my.data, assign that to as.data.frame my.data. Now when I look at my.data, it spits out the information, but the rows have been numbered. It's called the columns V1 and V2. Well, I actually want V1 to be the pretest and V2 to be the post-test. So I'm going to say names, my.data, and I'm going to assign this to C, pre, and post, where I've used quotation marks to indicate that I want that to go in as strings. Now if I type my data, it will spit out the entire data, but if I type head parenthesis my data, it will just give the first couple rows, and I see that it's actually renamed pre and post. Now last but not least, I want to go back and reattach that treatment variable that I created. So I'm going to say cbind, which is the column bind function. I want to take my data and combine to that the treatment variable, which was all caps treat. Now again, if I say head my.data, I have the treatment values indicated as now a 3rd column. Likewise, I could actually use the tail function and look at the bottom of the data set, and I see that that's where the treatment group has been indicated. All right. That's how to pool information. Not the most straightforward, but once you've used it a few times, you'll see that there's actually a number of advantages to having this type of flexibility in R. A few things to learn, but there's a bit of a learning curve. Hope this helps. Bye-bye.